So section 7 really is the exact same thing as section 6, but just we're adding one more layer of complexity to it. Where before we had like one fraction we'll multiply by, now we're going to have more than one. And it's because before we weren't working with rates. And if you remember, rates are just a ratio that have different units for the top and bottom. Exactly. So rates have 2 units. Example, you could say something like 70 miles per hour. Because we have miles and hours, that's going to be one of them. Or you could do something like, say we're collecting pop cans to raise money for Blandford or something. You could look at like how many cans per day your class brings in. Does that work for you? Mm-hmm. So we just need to have a fraction where the units in the numerator are different than the units in the denominator. That's kind of what makes it a rate. And because now we have 2 different types of units, it's possible that you're going to maybe have to do a couple steps. And you can do it without different units too, but let's just keep going. Okay, so use conversion ratios like 7.6 to change the units to what you want. And that'll make a little more sense as we go through. But okay, so example 1, let's just do a couple of these. So you get 65 pieces of junk mail in a week. So 65 pieces of junk mail in a week. I said before, the first step is really to write it as a fraction. So you could do junk per week. You want to do that? Yeah. So junk per week. And where do I put my 65? Does that go top, bottom? Go for it.
Goes in the middle.
Yep. That if it's, maybe say this, you're getting 65 pieces of junk mail in a week. Agreed? So if I were to write it this way, 1 over 65, is that still getting 65 pieces of junk mail in a week? No, it means you're getting in one piece of junk mail every 65 weeks. So that can't be right. So the 65 has to go in the top, that you're getting 65 pieces of junk or junk mail every 1 week. Yes?
Yeah.
And that's going to be true. If you're just given a single number, not a fraction, it'll be that number over 1. Doesn't change its value. Okay, so we're up to there. Is everybody okay for that first step? Now the question is, we want to take and change this to how many do you get per day? So we want to change this over to like junk mail or junk per day. Fair enough? So that's going to be our answer. How many pieces of junk mail do you get in a day? So we need to change that week to a day. And we do that by having a fraction in here that's going to take and change it to what we want. Now if we want weeks to cancel out, because we need weeks to be gone, right? Yeah. So where does the number of weeks unit have to be? Numerator or denominator? Numerator. Because if I have a number of weeks here, do you agree I'd be able to cancel those two? Yeah. And the units that we do want down below aren't weeks, they are days. We want this days over here on the right. So if I do weeks in the numerator and days in the denominator. Now, we need to have a certain number of weeks and a certain number of days where those two are the same. Easiest is to say 1 week over
7 days.
7 days. Does that work for you?
Yep.
Because 1 week and 7 days are the exact same amount of time. So it's kind of like this second fraction here then could just cancel out. It's kind of like a 5 over 5. It just equals 1. Essentially, we're multiplying this by 1 because these two are the same amount of time. All right. So when I do that now, I multiply, my weeks cancel out. So I get 65 times 1. So I get 65 in the numerator. And the only units there are going to be the junk, or junk mail. And in the denominator, I have a 1 times 7, and the only units there are days. So to get our final answer then, we just have to take and do 65 divided by 7, and we get 9.3. So we get 9.3 pieces of junk mail. You actually write the whole thing out per day. So things from Comcast, things from AT&T and DirecTV and
Amazon's Verizon.
So Verizon, Sprint, yep, those things. Does number 1 make sense?
No, it's not.
Any questions on number 1?
No. So
Okay.
You're allowed to just change.
Yes. You're allowed to change the units really whenever you want. The key is this fraction here has to be something where the amount on the top has to equal the amount on the bottom. And 1 doesn't equal 7, but 1 week is the exact same value as 7 days.
Okay.
So essentially, we're not changing the value of this any because we're multiplying it by, just something over itself. So that's how it works. All right, the American average family, the average American family tosses 540 pounds of metal per year. So I could write my fraction as 540 what over what?
Metal over years.
Metal. Or maybe can I do pounds
Yeah, that's what I said.
per 1 year?
That makes more sense.
And if you want to write the whole thing out, you could do pounds of metal or pounds metal, something like that. And we want to change this to ounces. I'm going to go way over to the far side. Ounces of metal per day. And this is where you might have to flip back to the section 6 notes to look at those different conversion factors. But one thing we need to do is change pounds to ounces. So should we start with that one?
Yeah.
So I'm going to have this fraction here. If I want pounds and ounces, pounds has to go up here in the numerator or in the denominator to cancel. Nice, denominator. So I'm going to have pounds down here. And I want to get ounces up in the numerator. So I can put in ounces there because we could say how many ounces are there in 1 pound. Does anyone remember?
16.
Perfect. So I could do 16 ounces over 1 pound. And those are both worth that same amount of weight. So by multiplying this by this fraction, this brown fraction is the same as multiplying by 1. We're not changing the value any. And that's going to take and cancel out pounds and get me the ounces that I want in my final answer. Still good?
Yep.
But the final units aren't going to be ounces per day. It's going to be ounces per year. So we need to get rid of that years and change it to days. So we need to have a second fraction here, a third fraction really. Where does years go? Top. So we want it to cancel out. And units for time that we want are days. So we could say however many days are in 1 year, how many days are in 2 years. Most people say 1 year is 365. Does it make sense 365 has to go down below with days?
Yep.
1 has to go up on top with years. You could pick other numbers, though. You could put a 2 in here for years. And what would that be, like 730 or something? But the numbers just get bigger and harder to work with. So next step, the reason we put years on top was because now this year's, the denominator cancels with this year's in the numerator. And if you look, the only units that are left, the only units in the numerator are ounces, which is what we wanted. Only units in the denominator are days, which is what we wanted. So we're almost done. So first step is to say, all right, let's multiply all those numerators together. So I have 540 times 16 times 1. And when I do that, I get 8,640. And my units in the top are ounces, so I'm going to write that down. In the denominator, I have 1 times 365. So that gives me 365. And the only units in the denominator, canceled out, days. So we have days. So we're up to there. Now our final step is to just simplify. Do 8,640 divided by 365, and we get 23.7. So 23.7 ounces of metal per day thrown out. 27.7.
What? So it's 27 or 23?
27.7. Oh, 23.7. Sorry about that. You punched it in. So 23.7. My bad. So 23.7 ounces per day. Any questions on that? We'll do example 3 real fast. And standard shower head outputs 6 gallons per minute. So I'm going to say 6, what over what?
Gallons per minute.
Perfect. Over 1 minute. And on the far end over here, we want to take and change that to ounces per second. And if we would do this, ounces for volume are different than ounces for pounds. So if you go back to the conversion factors we did in the 7-6 notes, this will be the FLOZ, the fluid ounces. All right, so we want to go gallons to ounces. All right, so my first fraction then. Gallons has to go in the bottom. Yep. And if we look, we'll see that 1 gallon is, anyone remember it? 128. Nice. 28.
Wow.
Can I just do ounces like that instead of the FLOZ? People okay with that? If you want to do FL for fluid ounces, that's totally fine. Ounces. And now my gallons canceled out, and I have the ounces that I want, so we're partway there. All right, next fraction. We need to get rid of minutes. So minutes has to go in the numerator, in the top. And the units we want for time would be
Hours. Get the money. Dollars.
seconds, right there. So do a S for seconds. Now we need to have time where a certain number of minutes is a certain number of seconds. Easiest is to say how many minutes?
6. 1 minute is 60 seconds.
Equals 60
Yep.
seconds.
But you could do 2 minutes is 120 seconds. That just makes more work for you at the end. Okay. Numerator. 6 times 128 times 1. And it looks as though I didn't cancel out my units there either. So in the numerator, I will have 768. And once I cancel out all my units, the only units that can't be canceled in the numerator are ounces. And in the denominator, I do 1 times 1 times 60, which gives me 60. The only units that can't cancel are seconds, which is exactly what we're looking for. Last step, 768 divided by 60 gives me 12.8 ounces per second. So probably about like one of your kitchen drinking glasses, probably about 12 ounces. So it's kind of like they're dumping one of those on you every second out of the shower head. So
That feels like a lot. That's actually kind of a lot.
that's the section.